A young billionaire pretends he has no money to test the kindness of two homeless girls, and their attitude leaves him speechless. The sun had barely peeked over the horizon when Jack Steele opened his eyes, staring at the ceiling of his penthouse suite with a vacant expression. The oppressive silence of his mansion wrapped around him like a cold, familiar blanket. At 30 years old, Jack was the CEO of Steele Tech, one of the most promising tech companies in Silicon Valley. Yet that morning, as with all the others, he felt more like a prisoner in a gilded cell than the most envied man in the valley. His bare feet touched the Italian marble floor, and he walked mechanically to a closet the size of a small apartment. Endless rows of custom-tailored Italian suits awaited him, each one costing more than a mid-level employee's annual salary. Jack chose a charcoal grey suit, matching the heaviness in his chest. As he dressed, his eyes involuntarily fell on a framed photo on the nightstand. It was the only reminder he allowed of a life that seemed to belong to someone else. In the picture, a younger Jack beamed with an open smile, surrounded by faces he once called friends. His jaw tightened, and he flipped the photo face down with a sharp motion. Breakfast was served at exactly 6:30 a.m., as always. His housekeeper, Mrs. Holloway, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes whom Jack made a point of ignoring, placed the tray on the balcony table with a murmured, "Good morning, Mr. Steele." Jack only grunted in response, his eyes fixed on his tablet showing the latest stock prices. "Anything else, sir?" Mrs. Holloway asked, her voice betraying a hint of concern that Jack chose not to acknowledge. "No," the curt, cold reply came automatically. Mrs. Holloway nodded and left quietly, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts and his untouched coffee. As he looked out over his meticulously landscaped 20-acre garden, Jack's mind wandered to the past, to the moments that had shaped him into the man he was today. Unwanted flashbacks invaded his thoughts, like intruders in his carefully constructed mental fortress. He saw himself once more in that conference room, 5 years ago. Jack, then an ambitious 25-year-old entrepreneur, was presenting his revolutionary vision to a group of investors. Among them, seated with an encouraging smile, was Michael Danton, his mentor and father figure ever since Jack lost his parents in his teens. "This is brilliant, Jack," Michael exclaimed after the presentation, his eyes shining with what Jack interpreted as pride. "Let's take this to the next level." The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, contracts, and grand dreams. Jack worked tirelessly, trusting Michael to handle the financial aspects while he focused on the technology. It was only when the first prototype was ready that the truth came to light. "I'm sorry, kid," Michael's voice echoed in his memory, cold and distant in a way Jack had never heard before. "Business is business. You should have read the fine print." The flashback dissolved, leaving Jack with a bitter taste in his mouth. Michael had manipulated the contracts, leaving Jack with a minority stake in his own company. The blow wasn't just financial, it was emotional. The betrayal by someone he considered family shattered something inside him. But Michael wasn't the only one. As Steele Tech grew into a tech giant, Jack repeatedly witnessed the greedy nature of those around him. Colleagues he considered friends tried to sabotage his projects out of envy. The girlfriend he had considered proposing to was caught leaking confidential information to a competitor. Each betrayal, each disappointment, added another layer to the wall Jack built around himself. Slowly, the idealistic young man gave way to a cold, calculating individual, convinced that the only person he could trust was himself. The sound of his cell phone brought him back to the present. It was Sarah, his assistant, reminding him of a board meeting in 1 hour. Jack replied with a terse, "Got it," and stood, adjusting his tie with precise movements. In the private elevator taking him to the underground garage, Jack caught his reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at him had piercing green eyes, devoid of warmth. His face, though undeniably handsome, was marked by lines of tension that had no place on someone so young. "Everyone's selfish," he muttered to himself, a mantra he repeated daily. "Everyone has a price." The Aston Martin purred to life under his touch, and Jack sped out of the estate. The drive to the office was short, but always tense. He watched the people on the sidewalks, convinced that each one would sell their own mother for a chance to be in his shoes. At the office, the air grew noticeably heavier when Jack passed by. Employees avoided his gaze or pretended to be busy, fearing to draw the attention of a boss notorious for his sharp tongue and zero tolerance for mistakes. "Mr. Steele," Sarah greeted him at the entrance to the boardroom, her professional tone masking her nerves. "The board is waiting." Jack gave a brief nod and entered, immediately dominating the room with his presence. The meeting proceeded like all the others. Figures, forecasts, strategies. Jack led with relentless efficiency, cutting down ideas he deemed weak and imposing his vision without hesitation. In the end, when the board members left with barely disguised relief on their faces, Jack remained seated, contemplating the panoramic view of the city stretching beyond the skyscraper windows. That was when an idea began to form in his mind, an idea born of the bitterness and skepticism that had become his constant companions. "Sarah," he called over the intercom, "cancel my appointments for the rest of the day." "But, Mr. Steele, the meeting with the Japanese investors—" "I said cancel everything," Jack cut in, his voice leaving no room for argument. With renewed determination, Jack left the office, ignoring the puzzled looks of his employees. In the parking lot, instead of his luxury car, he took a discreet vehicle he kept for occasions when he didn't want to be recognized. At his downtown penthouse, an apartment few knew he owned, Jack swapped his expensive suit for simple clothes, faded jeans, a grey t-shirt, and a worn jacket. Looking in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. It was exactly what he wanted. "Let's see how kind people really are," he muttered, a humorless smile curving his lips. The streets were crowded when Jack left the building, blending easily with the throngs of workers and tourists. He walked aimlessly, observing the interactions around him with critical eyes. Couples arguing about money, executives shouting on the phone, teenagers mocking a homeless person. Each scene only reinforced his cynical view of the world. It was when he reached a bustling square that something caught his eye. Amid the rush of hurried adults and noisy children, two small figures stood out for their stillness. They were two little girls, clearly sisters, who couldn't have been older than 5. Jack stopped, intrigued by the contrast they presented. Their clothes were old and a bit too large, their brown hair was disheveled, and their shoes had seen better days. But their faces shone with a joy that seemed out of place given their appearance. The sisters were sitting on the edge of a fountain, sharing what appeared to be a piece of chocolate. They giggled and talked excitedly, completely oblivious to the looks of pity or disapproval some passers-by cast their way. Something about that scene made Jack approach, though he didn't know why. When he was just a few steps away, one of the girls, the one with a small freckle near her left eye, looked in his direction and smiled. "Mr." she called out, her voice surprisingly clear and confident. "Do you have any spare change so we can buy a snack?" Jack felt his face harden automatically. This was it, he thought. Proof that even kids learn to beg, to take advantage of other people's kindness. He was about to turn away when the other twins spoke up. "Emily," she gently scolded her sister, "we can't just ask like that. Remember what Mommy used to say?" The girl named Emily lowered her eyes, looking genuinely ashamed. "Sorry, mister," she mumbled. "We didn't mean to bother you." Jack stood there, unsure how to react. Part of him, the part that had dominated for the last few years, just wanted to leave. But something kept him there, watching these two little figures who seemed so out of place in the cruel world he knew so well. "I don't have anything to give," he finally replied, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. The girls exchanged a glance, and then, to Jack's total surprise, they smiled. The one who wasn't Emily, Jack assumed she was Olivia, held out her hand, offering the last piece of chocolate they'd been sharing. "It's okay, mister," she said, her eyes shining with an innocence Jack had forgotten existed. "We can share our chocolate with you if you want." Jack froze, staring at the tiny piece of candy as though it were something alien. His brain struggled to process what was happening. Here were two children, clearly in need, offering the last thing they had to a stranger who had just refused to help them. "Why?" The word slipped from his lips before he could stop it. Emily shrugged, a surprisingly mature gesture for someone so young. "Because sharing makes us happy, "And you look sad, mister." At that moment, something inside Jack trembled. A minuscule crack appeared in the wall he had built around his heart. He found himself unable to form words, his throat strangely tight. "No, thank you," he finally managed to say, his voice hoarse. "Keep the chocolate. You need it more than I do." The twins smiled again, not seeming offended by his refusal. "Okay, mister. Have a nice day," Olivia exclaimed, waving cheerfully. Jack walked away, his steps unsteady. He found a nearby bench and sat down, feeling oddly disoriented. His mind replayed the encounter over and over, trying to find some angle, some explanation that fit his worldview. But there was nothing. No hidden motive, no personal gain, just kindness. Pure and simple kindness from two children who, despite their circumstances, still saw the world as a place where sharing was more important than receiving. Jack watched the twins from a distance, noticing how they interacted with other people in the square. They offered smiles to grouchy strangers, helped an elderly lady pick up something she'd dropped, and laughed with abandon at things only they seemed to see. And for the first time in years, Jack Steele felt something different. It wasn't exactly happiness nor hope. It was more like doubt. Doubt about the truths he had held as absolute for so long. As the sun began to set, painting the sky shades of orange and pink, Jack remained seated, his eyes never leaving the two small figures who had unwittingly planted the seed of change in the heart of a man who had long since stopped believing in goodness. The sun had already gone down, yet Jack Steele remained on the bench, his gaze fixed on the two small figures playing near the fountain. The twins, Emily and Olivia, seemed oblivious to the world around them, laughing and chatting happily as they finished off the last pieces of their chocolate. Jack frowned, his analytical mind working furiously to find a logical explanation for the girls' behavior. "There must be an ulterior motive," he muttered to himself, running a hand through his rumpled hair. "No one is that altruistic, especially homeless kids." He tried to rationalize the twins' gesture in every possible way. Maybe it was a carefully orchestrated tactic to gain people's sympathy and get more money. Or perhaps an adult had trained them to appear innocent and defenseless. Jack even considered that this might be a stress-induced hallucination. After all, when was the last time he'd slept more than 4 hours straight? But no matter how hard he tried, Jack couldn't fit what he had witnessed into his cynical view of the world. The purity of that gesture, the genuine joy in the girls' eyes as they offered the chocolate, it all defied his cold, calculating logic. Determined to uncover the truth, Jack decided to stay and observe the twins for a while longer. He moved to a more distant bench, partially concealed by a tree, where he could watch without being easily noticed. Hours passed, and Jack witnessed scene after scene that defied his understanding. Emily and Olivia smiled at every passerby, regardless of whether they received anything in return. When an elderly man dropped his groceries, the girls ran to help him, refusing the coin he offered as thanks. They shared the little they had with other homeless people, always with a smile and a kind word. Jack found himself leaning forward, eager to catch snippets of their conversations. He desperately looked for signs of deceit, for some clue that this was just an elaborate act. But there was nothing. Only pure, unwavering kindness. As night wore on, Jack noticed the girls starting to look for a place to sleep. His chest tightened involuntarily when he saw them settle on a nearby bench, using old newspapers as blankets. Before he could stop himself, he found himself walking toward them. "Hello," he said hesitantly, his voice rough from disuse. The twins looked up, identical smiles lighting their faces in recognition. "Hi, mister," Emily exclaimed. "You came back." Jack felt a knot form in his throat. How could they be so happy to see him? Hyde, who had refused to help them just hours earlier. Yes," he stammered, feeling strangely awkward. "I was wondering, well, you two seem to have been here for a while. Do you have anywhere to sleep tonight?" Olivia shook her head, her eyes wide and honest. "We sleep right here, mister, but it's okay, we're used to it." Jack felt something tighten in his chest. He wanted to offer help, to take them somewhere safe, but something held him back. Fear, distrust. He wasn't sure. "Have you always been on the streets?" he asked. trying to keep his tone casual. The girls exchanged a quick glance, a shadow crossing their young faces. "We had Mommy," Emily said softly, "but she got sick. Really sick. Then she went away," Olivia added, her voice trembling slightly, "just like Daddy did a long time ago." Jack felt his throat constrict. He wanted to say something, to offer some comfort, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he just nodded, hoping the girls would understand. "But it's okay," Emily continued, her smile returning. "We take care of each other. And there are nice people like you who sometimes help." Jack felt a wave of emotion he couldn't name. Admiration, sadness, guilt, all swirling together in a confusing whirlwind. "You two are very brave," he managed to say at last. The twins smiled in unison, a gesture that made something inside Jack shift uncomfortably. I have to go," he finally said, stepping back. "But maybe I'll come back tomorrow to check on you." The twins' faces lit up with identical smiles. "We'd really like that," Emily said. "See you tomorrow, mister," Olivia added, waving cheerfully. Jack nodded, feeling strangely emotional. He turned to leave, but stopped after a few steps. "Thank you," he said over his shoulder, "for reminding me that there's still goodness in the world." The twins smiled, their eyes glowing with an innocence Jack had forgotten existed. He walked away, his heart heavy with emotions he hadn't felt in years. In the days that followed, Jack found himself returning to the square repeatedly. He kept his distance, watching the twins from afar, but he couldn't stay away. Each day brought new observations, new moments that challenged his cynical worldview. He saw them helping other homeless people, sharing the little they had while offering smiles and comforting words. He watched them console a girl who had lost her dog, even offering their only toy, a tattered rag doll, to cheer her up. Jack witnessed Emily and Olivia turn even the most mundane tasks into fun games, finding joy in the smallest things. As the days passed, Jack felt something shifting inside him. Empathy, an emotion he had long since buried, began to take root in his chest. He found himself worried when it rained, wondering if the girls were staying warm and dry. He involuntarily smiled when he saw them laugh, feeling a strange warmth spread through his body. But along with these feelings came fierce internal conflict. The part of him molded by years of disappointments and betrayals fought against this new vulnerability. "They're just homeless kids," he told himself. "They mean nothing to you. Don't get involved." Still, Jack couldn't stay away. He caught himself performing small acts of kindness almost without realizing it. One day, he accidentally dropped a large bill near them, pretending not to notice as Emily ran to return it. On another, he discreetly bought hot meals and left them near where the girls usually slept. Each act of kindness was followed by a wave of self-criticism. Jack berated himself for his weakness, vowing each time it would be the last. But he always came back, drawn by a force he didn't fully understand. One particularly hot afternoon, Jack watched the twins playing at the fountain, their laughter echoing through the square. Suddenly, Olivia slipped, hitting her head on the stone edge. Before he could stop himself, Jack found himself running toward her, his heart pounding with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, kneeling beside the girl. Olivia, tears in her eyes but still smiling, nodded. "I'm okay, mister. Thank you for worrying." Jack felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to hug her, to comfort her, to protect her from every danger in the world. The urge was so strong it frightened him. I have to go," he mumbled, standing abruptly. He hurried away, ignoring the confused calls of the girls. Back at his luxurious apartment, Jack poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hands trembling slightly. What was happening to him? How had two little girls on the street managed to break through his defenses so thoroughly? He spent the night wide awake, torn between the desire to help the twins and the paralyzing fear of becoming vulnerable again. Memories of past betrayals mixed with images of Emily and Olivia's innocent smiles, creating an emotional whirlpool that left him dizzy. When dawn broke, Jack had made a decision. He would go to the square one last time, give the girls a significant amount of money, and never return. It was best for everyone, he told himself. He couldn't get any more involved. But when he arrived at the square, his heart sank. The twins were not in their usual spot. Jack spent hours searching, panic mounting with each passing minute. Where were they? Had something happened? Then he saw them, across the street. They were helping a homeless man push his cart full of belongings up a hill, their small bodies straining with effort. In that moment, something inside Jack cracked. All his resolutions, all his fears and hesitations seemed insignificant in the face of the pure kindness unfolding before him. He crossed the street with determined steps, ignoring the blaring car horns. "Emily, Olivia," he called, his voice rough with emotion. The girls turned, their faces lighting up at the sight of him. "Mister!" they exclaimed in unison, running toward him. Jack knelt down, allowing himself for the first time to embrace them. He felt tears he hadn't known he could shed running down his face. "I was worried about you," he admitted, his voice trembling. Emily smiled, her eyes sparkling with understanding. "We're okay, mister. We always take care of each other." Jack nodded, feeling a mixture of admiration and sadness. He knew he couldn't just take them home and change their lives overnight. But in that moment, he made a silent promise to himself and to the girls. "I'm going to help you," he said softly. "I don't know how yet, but I'll find a way." The twins smiled, a blend of hope and caution in their eyes. They had learned not to trust easily, but something about Jack made them want to believe. "Thank you, mister," Olivia said simply. Jack stood, feeling simultaneously light and burdened. He knew the path ahead would be difficult, full of obstacles and doubts. But for the first time in years, he felt he had a purpose. As he walked back to his world of luxury and power, Jack Steele knew he would never be the same. The twins had planted a seed of change in his heart, and he was determined not to let it wither. The embittered billionaire was, slowly but surely, learning to feel again. And although it scared him, part of him, a part he thought he had lost a long time ago, rejoiced at the possibility of redemption. As Jack walked away from the square, he cast one last look over his shoulder at Emily and Olivia. The twins waved at him, their bright smiles a stark contrast to their worn-out clothes. He felt a tightness in his chest, a swirl of emotions he couldn't fully name. Back at his Steel Tech office, Jack found himself unable to focus on the reports and spreadsheets that once consumed all his attention. His thoughts kept returning to those two small figures in the square, to their unwavering kindness in the face of hardship. Sitting in his leather chair, gazing out at the city through his high-rise windows, Jack Steele made a decision. He didn't know exactly how, but he would find a way to help Emily and Olivia and other kids like them, not out of pity or guilt, but because, for the first time in years, he felt it was the right thing to do. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jack began drafting plans for a new social responsibility initiative at Steel Tech. It would be a long road, full of challenges and, undoubtedly, moments of doubt. But for the first time in a long time, Jack Steele looked to the future not with cynicism, but with a spark of hope. And down below, in the now darkened square, two little figures fell asleep side by side, unaware of the impact they had just had on the life of a man who had long since forgotten how to feel. The sun had barely risen when Jack Steele arrived at the square, his eyes anxiously searching for the two familiar figures who had become a constant in his life over the past few weeks. He spotted them on the same bench as always, but something was different. Emily was leaning over Olivia, her little face contorted with worry. Jack felt his heart race. Something was wrong. Approaching discreetly, he hid behind a nearby tree, watching the scene unfold. Emily was pressing her hand to Olivia's forehead, her lips moving in words Jack couldn't hear. "Liv, you're too hot," Emily murmured, just loud enough for Jack to pick up. "I think you have a fever," Olivia coughed weakly, her small body trembling despite the morning warmth. "I'm cold, Em," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Jack felt a tightening in his chest. His first instinct was to run to them, scoop Olivia into his arms, and take her to the best hospital in the city. But he held back, his old defenses fighting against this new urge to care and protect. "Not your problem," he muttered to himself, his hands clenched into fists. "They're not anything to you. Don't get involved." But even as he spoke the words, Jack knew they were lies. Emily and Olivia had become more than just homeless kids to him. They were a reminder of a humanity he'd thought he'd lost long ago. Throughout the day, Jack watched helplessly as Emily cared for her sister, with a maturity that broke his heart. She used a damp piece of cloth to cool Olivia's forehead, begged passers-by for clean water, and sang softly when Olivia moaned in discomfort. Emily ran back and forth, trying to find something, anything, that might help her sister. Jack saw her asking strangers for money, desperately explaining that she needed to buy medicine for Olivia. Most people walked by pretending not to hear. Some gave a few coins, but it was clearly not enough. "Please, sir," Jack heard Emily plead with a man in a suit. "My sister's sick, just a little so I can buy medicine." The man looked at Emily with a mix of pity and discomfort, but kept walking without a word. Jack felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. How could people be so callous? With each passing hour, Olivia's condition seemed to worsen. Her breathing grew more labored, her skin paler. Jack found himself pacing back and forth, waging an internal war. "She's not your responsibility," one side of him insisted. "You don't owe them anything." But another voice, one he barely recognized as his own, countered, "What if it were you? What if you were sick and alone in the street?" Jack watched as Emily tried to get Olivia to drink a little water. The younger girl coughed violently, almost choking on the liquid. Emily held her, silent tears streaming down her face. "You'll be okay, Liv," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I promise. You'll get better." Jack felt his heart break. The strength of that small girl, caring for her sister with so few resources, was both inspiring and devastating. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in orange hues, Jack couldn't take it anymore. He saw Olivia have a particularly severe coughing fit, her tiny body shaking violently, and something inside him snapped. With determined strides, he emerged from his hiding place and approached the girls. Emily looked up, surprise and relief mixed on her face. "Mr. Jack," she exclaimed, "you came back." Jack knelt beside them, his eyes fixed on Olivia. "What happened?" he asked, his voice rough with worry. Emily sniffled, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Liv is sick. She's running a fever and can't stop coughing. I don't know what to do." Jack reached out and gently touched Olivia's forehead. She was burning up. Without a second thought, he pulled out his phone. This time, not the simple model he'd been using around them, but his top-of-the-line smartphone. Emily's eyes widened at the sight of the expensive device. "Mr. Jack?" she whispered, confusion obvious in her voice. Jack hesitated for a moment, knowing he was about to destroy the facade he'd kept up for weeks. But looking at Olivia, trembling and pale, he realized he no longer cared. "Emily," he said softly, "I haven't been completely honest with you. I have resources to help Olivia, but to do that, I need to reveal who I really am." Emily frowned, glancing from Jack to the fancy phone in his hand. "Who are you really?" Jack took a deep breath. "My name is Jack Steele. I'm the owner of Steel Tech." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily looked at Jack like she was seeing him for the first time, a mixture of fear, confusion, and betrayal in her eyes. "You lied to us," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jack felt his heart tighten. "Yes," he admitted. "At first, I wanted to see how people would treat someone who looked like they had nothing, but then I met you two and everything changed." He was interrupted by another coughing fit from Olivia. Jack turned his attention to her, worry etched on his face. "Emily," he said urgently, "I know you have no reason to trust me now, but Olivia needs medical help. I can provide it. Please, let me help." Emily looked at her sister, the conflict plain on her young face. For a terrible moment, Jack feared she would refuse his help, reject him completely. But then Olivia let out a small groan, her face contorted with pain. And in that moment, Jack saw the decision form in Emily's eyes. "Okay," she said simply, her voice small but firm. "Please help my sister." Jack felt a surge of relief so intense it nearly knocked him over. "Thank you, Emily," he whispered. With trembling fingers, He dialed a number on his phone. When a voice answered on the other end, Jack spoke with an authority that surprised even himself. "Dr. Ramirez, it's Jack Steele. I need you to come immediately. It's an emergency." In the minutes that followed, Jack arranged for medical transport, ordered his mansion to be prepared to receive the girls, and made sure Dr. Ramirez had access to all necessary equipment. As they waited for the ambulance to arrive, Jack found himself explaining his story to Emily. He talked about his rough childhood, how he built his tech empire, and how along the way he lost his faith in humanity. "But you two," he said gently, "you reminded me what it means to be human, what it means to care about someone else." Emily listened silently, her eyes never leaving Jack. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Will you take care of us now?" she finally asked, her voice small and vulnerable. Jack felt something shatter inside him. "Yes," he promised. "If you'll let me, I'll take care of both of you. Always." The sound of sirens cut through the air, announcing the ambulance's arrival. Within minutes, Olivia was being carefully placed on a stretcher, with Emily clinging tightly to her hand. Jack followed them into the ambulance, his heart pounding in his chest. As the vehicle sped through the city streets, he found himself confronting emotions he'd long buried. Fear. He was terrified something might happen to Olivia. Vulnerability. For the first time in years, he deeply cared about someone other than himself, and it exposed him in a way that scared him. Hope. Despite everything, a small flame of hope was flickering in his chest. Hope that he could be better, that he could make a difference in these girls' lives. Jack looked at Emily, who was watching the paramedics care for Olivia with wide and frightened eyes. Gently, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "She'll be okay," he said softly. "I promise." Emily looked at him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "You swear?" Jack swallowed hard, feeling the weight of that promise. "I swear," he replied, knowing he would do anything to keep it. As they neared the steel mansion, Jack could feel the tension growing inside him. How would the girls react to seeing his true home? Would they reject him once they realized the extent of his deception? When the ambulance finally stopped in front of the imposing structure, Jack took a deep breath, bracing himself for what was to come. "Emily," he said softly, "we're at my house." The girl looked out the ambulance window, her eyes widening in shock. That's a house," she whispered, incredulous. Jack nodded, feeling strangely ashamed of his opulence. "Yes," he replied, "this is where I live." The ambulance doors opened, and a team of doctors and nurses quickly began transferring Olivia inside the mansion. Emily followed closely, still holding her sister's hand, her eyes wide as she tried to take everything in. Jack walked behind them, his heart pounding. He watched the girls' reactions as they passed through luxurious corridors adorned with expensive artwork and antique furniture. Emily seemed completely overwhelmed, her eyes darting from one object to another, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Olivia, though semi-conscious, also seemed aware of the change in surroundings, her feverish eyes occasionally flickering open in confusion. Finally, they reached a room Jack had prepared especially for Olivia. It was spacious and airy, equipped with state-of-the-art medical equipment. As the medical team transferred Olivia to the bed and began examining her, Jack turned to Emily, who looked lost and scared amid all the commotion. "Emily," he said gently, kneeling to meet her gaze, "I know this is a lot to process right now, but please know they're doing everything they can to help your sister." Emily nodded slowly, her eyes still wide. "Mr. Jack," she whispered, "why did you lie to us? Why did you pretend to be poor?" Jack felt a knot form in his throat. He knew he owed this brave girl the truth. I lost faith in people, Emily," he admitted. "I thought everyone only cared about money and power. I wanted to see how people treated someone who had nothing to offer." Emily studied him for a long moment, her expression surprisingly mature for someone so young. "And what did you find out?" Jack felt unexpected tears prick his eyes. "I found out I was wrong," he answered softly. "Thanks to you and Olivia, I remembered there's still goodness in the world." Emily was silent for a moment, processing his words. Then, to Jack's surprise, she reached out and gently touched his face. "You looked so sad when we met you," she said. "Are you still sad?" Jack felt something inside him break. "No," he replied honestly. "I'm not sad anymore. I'm hopeful." At that moment, a sharp cry echoed through the room. "Emily!" Olivia's voice called, frightened and confused. In an instant, Emily was at her sister's bedside, holding her hand and murmuring words of comfort. Jack watched, awed by the bond between the two. Dr. Ramirez approached Jack, his expression serious. "Mr. Steele, the girl has a severe case of pneumonia. She'll need intensive treatment." Jack nodded, a wave of worry washing over him. "Do whatever it takes, doctor. Money is no object." While the medical team worked, administering antibiotics and monitoring Olivia's vitals, Jack found himself unable to leave the room. He watched anxiously every procedure, every reading on the monitors, his heart tight with concern. Emily remained a constant presence at her sister's side, singing softly and telling stories even when Olivia was unconscious. Jack wondered how many times she had done this before, caring for Olivia on the streets, without help or resources. The hours passed slowly. Jack lost track of time, his world reduced to that room and those two little girls who had somehow become the center of his universe. It was nearly dawn when Dr. Ramirez finally announced that Olivia's fever was subsiding. Jack felt his legs give way with relief. "She's going to be fine," the doctor assured him. "She'll need care and rest, but she'll fully recover." Jack nodded, feeling a surge of relief so intense it nearly floored him. He looked at Emily, who had fallen asleep in a chair beside Olivia's bed, her small hand still holding her sister's. In that moment, Jack Steele knew his life had changed irrevocably. He was no longer just a lonely billionaire, focused on amassing more wealth and power. Now he was a guardian, a protector, maybe a father. The thought both frightened and thrilled him in equal measure. There was so much to consider: legal issues, adjustments in his life and home, learning to be a parental figure, something he never had. But looking at Emily and Olivia, one sleeping in exhaustion and the other finally resting peacefully, Jack felt a determination he hadn't experienced in years. He would make this work. For them. For himself. Quietly, he stood and walked to the window. The city outside was beginning to stir, the first rays of sunlight painting the sky pink and gold. Jack realized he was seeing it all through new eyes. Not as an empire to be conquered, but as a place full of people, stories, and possibilities. He turned back to look at the girls again. A gentle smile, something that would have seemed foreign on his face just days ago, curved his lips. "Welcome to your new home," he whispered, knowing they couldn't hear him. Jack knew the road ahead would be challenging. Emily still had many questions, much distrust to overcome. Olivia had a long recovery ahead of her, and he had a lifetime of habits and beliefs to unlearn. But for the first time in a long time, Jack Steele looked to the future not with cynicism, but with hope. A fragile, uncertain hope, yet real. The chapter of his life as a lonely, embittered man was coming to an end. A new chapter, bright and full of challenges, was about to begin. Jack stayed by the window for a long time, watching the sunrise and reflecting on the extraordinary turn his life had taken. He wondered how he would explain all this to his board of directors, his employees, the media. The once powerful and merciless Jack Steele suddenly taking in 2 homeless children. It would be a scandal, no doubt. But, surprisingly, Jack found he didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt he was doing something truly meaningful. A soft moan drew his attention back to the bed. Olivia was waking up, her eyes blinking in confusion as she took in her new surroundings. "Em?" she called weakly. "Emily?" In an instant, Emily was awake and at her sister's side. "I'm here, Liv," she whispered, stroking Olivia's hair. "You're safe." Jack approached slowly, not wanting to startle Olivia. The little girl saw him, and her eyes widened. "Mr. Jack," she murmured. Where are we?" Jack knelt beside the bed, feeling inexplicably nervous. "You're at my house, Olivia," he explained gently. "You got very sick, so we brought you here so you could get treatment." Olivia looked around, her eyes sweeping over the luxurious room in awe. "Your house is a hospital." Jack couldn't help a small smile. "No, sweetheart, it's just a very big house. And now, well, it's yours too if you want to stay." Emily and Olivia exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Emily turned to Jack. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why do you want us to stay?" Jack felt the weight of her question. He knew his answer could change everything. Taking a deep breath, he decided to be completely honest. "Because you taught me something I had forgotten," he began. "You showed me that there's still goodness in the world, that it's still possible to trust, to care, to love." He paused, feeling emotion thicken his voice. "And because, for the first time in a long time, I don't want to be alone. I want to take care of you, protect you, give you all the opportunities you deserve." There was a moment of silence after his words. Jack could feel his heart pounding, dreading rejection. Then, to his surprise, Olivia reached out a trembling hand toward him. "You promise?" she asked, her voice small but hopeful. Jack took her hand gently, feeling as though something inside him finally fell into place. "I promise," he answered, his voice firm despite the tears threatening to fall. Emily watched the scene for a moment, then slowly placed her hand atop Jack's and Olivia's. "Then we'll stay," she said simply. In that moment, as the morning sun flooded the room with golden light, Jack Steele knew he was witnessing the start of something precious. A family, not formed by blood ties, but by choice, by compassion, by love. The road ahead would be long and undoubtedly filled with challenges. There would be adjustments to make, trust to build, emotional wounds to heal. But looking at Emily and Olivia, Jack felt a certainty he had never experienced before. Together they would face whatever the future held, and for the first time in his life, Jack Steele wasn't merely existing or surviving, he was truly living. In the days that followed Emily and Olivia's arrival at the Steele mansion, Jack found himself on an emotional roller coaster. As the girls gradually adjusted to their new environment, Jack felt increasingly out of place in his own home. The mansion, once a sanctuary of silence and order, now echoed with childish laughter and lively chatter. Jack often found himself standing in the corridor, watching the twins explore the rooms with a blend of fascination and apprehension. One morning, while sipping his coffee on the veranda, Jack heard a crash coming from the living room. Rushing to investigate, he discovered a very expensive vase shattered on the floor and Emily standing beside it, her eyes wide with fear. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jack," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "I didn't mean to break it." "We can leave if you want." Jack felt his heart tighten. He knelt beside Emily, ignoring the shards of porcelain entirely. "It's all right, Emily," he said softly. "It's just a vase. What matters is you didn't get hurt." Emily looked at him in disbelief. "But it was expensive, wasn't it?" Jack shrugged, surprised by his own indifference to an object he once would have deemed priceless. "It was, but you and Olivia are far more valuable to me than any vase." The words slipped out before he could think, and Jack found himself startled by their truth. When exactly had these two girls become so important to him? Later that day, Jack gathered the courage to have a conversation he'd been avoiding. He found the twins in the garden where Olivia, still recovering from pneumonia, rested under a tree while Emily picked flowers. "Girls," he called, feeling oddly nervous, "I'd like to talk to you about something important." They both looked at him curiously. Jack took a deep breath before continuing. "I want to give you the opportunity to stay here, permanently. If you want, of course." A tense silence fell. Jack could feel his heart pounding, fearing rejection. It was Emily who spoke first, her voice cautious. "Why?" The question caught Jack by surprise. He'd expected gratitude, maybe even excitement. But the distrust in Emily's eyes made him realize this transition wouldn't be as simple as he'd hoped. "Because," he began, struggling for the right words, "I care about you. I want to give you a chance at a better, safer life." Emily frowned, clearly unconvinced. "But you barely know us and we have nothing to give you in return." Jack felt a pang of guilt. It was true, he hardly knew them. What was driving him? Loneliness? Guilt? Or was it something deeper, something he still didn't fully understand? "You've already given me something very valuable," he said at last. "You reminded me what it's like to care about someone, to want to protect and provide." "That's priceless." Olivia, who had remained silent until then, spoke softly. "Can we stay together? Emily and me?" "Of course," Jack answered quickly. "You'll never be separated. I promise." The girls exchanged a look, having one of those silent conversations Jack still couldn't decipher. Finally, Emily nodded slowly. "We can try," she said. "But if it doesn't work, can we leave?" Jack felt his heart clench at the thought, but he knew he had to be honest. "Yes, you'll always have that choice." In the days that followed, Jack found himself constantly challenged by situations he wasn't prepared for. One morning, he walked into the kitchen to find Emily attempting to make pancakes, flour scattered everywhere. "I wanted to make breakfast for Olivia," she explained, looking embarrassed. "But I guess it didn't go well." Jack surveyed the mess, feeling a mix of frustration and fondness. "It's okay," he said, grabbing a cloth. "We'll clean this up together, then I'll teach you how to make pancakes. Deal?" It wasn't until he was mixing the batter that Jack realized he'd never made pancakes before. He'd always had chefs to prepare his meals. The result was crooked, slightly burnt pancakes, but the smile on Olivia's face as she ate them made it all worthwhile. Another night, Jack was awakened by screams coming from the girls' room. Rushing in, he found Olivia crying after a nightmare, with Emily trying to console her. "Shh, it's okay, Liv," Emily murmured, hugging her sister. "It was just a bad dream." Jack stood in the doorway, feeling utterly useless. What was he supposed to do? How did one comfort a frightened child? Hesitantly, he approached the bed. Can I help somehow?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Emily looked at him, surprised by his presence. After a moment, she nodded. "Could you tell us a story? Sometimes that helps Olivia go back to sleep." Jack swallowed hard, feeling out of his depth. A story. He didn't know any children's stories, but one look at the hopeful eyes of the girls told him he couldn't disappoint them. "All right," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Once upon a time." The tale that followed was a jumbled mix of half-remembered fairy tales and awkward improvisation. Yet to his surprise, the girls listened intently, giggling at his corny jokes and asking enthusiastic questions. By the time he finished, Olivia had fallen asleep again, a small smile on her face. Emily looked at Jack with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. "Thanks, Mr. Jack," she said softly. "That was a good story." That night, lying in his own bed, Jack replayed the entire day in his mind. Who was he now? The ruthless businessman or the man telling clumsy bedtime stories to make a child smile? He felt vulnerable, exposed in a way he'd never been before, and yet there was a strange sense of completeness, as though a void he hadn't known existed was finally being filled. Jack knew there was still a long road ahead. He had much to learn about being a guardian, a protector. He would make mistakes, undoubtedly, but staring at the ceiling, he found himself smiling. For the first time in years, Jack Steele was looking forward to what tomorrow would bring. And it was all thanks to two little girls who had turned his world upside down. As the days turned into weeks, Jack realized the change in his life was deeper than he ever imagined. Every small moment with the girls, from helping Emily with her homework to holding Olivia's hand during a medical checkup, made him question everything he thought he knew about himself and the world. One evening, while watching the twins asleep in their new rooms, Jack found himself reflecting on the man he used to be. The Jack Steele from a few weeks ago would have scoffed at the idea of opening his heart and home to two homeless children. Now, he couldn't imagine life without them. Quietly walking back to his office, Jack stopped in front of a framed photo on the wall. It was him, younger, receiving an Entrepreneur of the Year award. Back then, it had felt like the pinnacle of his achievements. Now, looking at that picture, he saw only a lonely man hiding behind a facade of success. With a sigh, Jack settled into his chair, gazing out at the lit-up city through the window. He knew the path ahead would still be full of challenges, moments of doubt, frustration, even regret. But for the first time in years, he truly felt alive. Maybe, Jack murmured to himself, a small smile curving his lips. Maybe I'm the one who needed saving all along. With that thought, Jack Steele, the man who once believed success was measured only by numbers in a bank account, closed his eyes and allowed himself to dream of a future filled with children's laughter, clumsy hugs, and unconditional love. The adjustment might be uncomfortable, but Jack was beginning to realize it was exactly what he needed. Jack Steele straightened his tie, feeling unusually nervous as he entered the family law office. He, who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without batting an eye, now felt like a rookie facing his latest challenge. "Mr. Steele," greeted Dr. Martinez, the attorney, shaking his hand firmly. "I understand you want to discuss the possibility of obtaining guardianship of 2 minors. Jack nodded, sitting in the offered chair. "Yes, Emily and Olivia. They've been living with me these past few weeks." Dr. Martinez raised an eyebrow. "And what is your relationship with these children, Mr. Steele?" Jack hesitated. How could he explain something he himself didn't fully understand? "I found them on the streets. They were alone, with no one to look after them. I couldn't just leave them." The attorney studied him for a moment before launching into detailed questions about how they'd met, the girl's current situation, and Jack's plans for the future. As Jack answered, he found himself surprised by the intensity of his own feelings. He talked about Olivia's smile when she learned to read her first word, about how Emily impressed him with her maturity and compassion. Without realizing it, he was revealing the deep bond he had developed with the twins. "Mr. Steele," Dr. Martinez said finally, "I must caution you that this will not be a simple process. There are many legal complexities in adopting children, especially under these unusual circumstances." Jack felt his stomach drop. "What kind of complexities?" "Well, to start, we need to establish that the girls are indeed orphans, or that their biological parents, if alive, are unfit to care for them. Then there's the question of your suitability as a guardian. No offense, Mr. Steele, but a single man with no child-rearing experience is not the typical adoption candidate." Jack clenched his fists, feeling frustration rise. "But I can give them a better life. Security, education, opportunities." "I understand," the attorney interrupted gently. "But the courts care more about emotional stability and caregiving capacity than financial resources. We'll have to prove you can provide a loving, stable environment." Over the following weeks, Jack was swept into a whirlwind of bureaucracy and investigations. Social workers visited his home, interviewed the girls, examined every aspect of his life. One particularly stressful afternoon, after a long meeting with investigators, Jack locked himself in his office, feeling overwhelmed. That was when he heard a soft knock on the door. "Mr. Jack?" Emily's voice sounded from the other side. "Are you okay?" Jack took a deep breath, trying to compose himself before opening the door. Emily stood there, her big eyes full of concern. "I'm okay, Emily." He tried to smile, but knew it wasn't convincing. Emily frowned. "You're upset because of us, because we can leave if we're causing trouble." Jack felt his heart clench. Kneeling down, he met Emily's gaze. "No, Emily, you're not causing trouble. I'm causing trouble for myself by not knowing how to handle all this properly." To his surprise, Emily gave him a small smile. "But you're trying, right? That's what matters." At that moment, Jack felt a wave of renewed determination. He wouldn't give up, no matter how difficult it got. The challenges weren't just legal. Jack found balancing his role as CEO of Steel Tech with his new responsibilities as a guardian a Herculean task. One morning, he was in the middle of an important video conference when he heard a shriek from upstairs. Without hesitation, Jack muttered an apology and ran to see what had happened. He found Olivia in the bathroom, crying because she'd spilled toothpaste on her new dress. It was such a small, trivial problem compared to the multi-million-dollar business he'd been discussing moments before. Yet, in that instant, soothing Olivia felt like the most important thing in the world. When he returned to his meeting, apologizing profusely, Jack realized something fundamental had changed. For the first time in his life, his work was no longer his top priority. The realization scared him. There were moments when Jack wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Was he really prepared for this responsibility? Or was he just playing dad, risking the girl's well-being in the process? One particularly rough night, after a day full of legal and corporate setbacks, Jack considered quitting. Perhaps it would be better for everyone if he found a good adoptive family who truly knew how to raise kids. Then Olivia appeared in his office, a book in her hands. "Mr. Jack," she said timidly, "could you read this to me? Emily's tired tonight." Jack looked at the stack of documents on his desk, then at the unread emails on his computer. Then he looked back at Olivia, with her hopeful eyes and unicorn pajamas. "Sure, sweetheart," he heard himself say. "Let's read." As he read the story, Olivia nestled against him, and Jack felt something change inside him. He might not be perfect, he might make mistakes, but he was doing his best. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Days turned into weeks, and gradually, almost imperceptibly, Jack and Emily and Olivia began forming deeper bonds. There were still awkward moments, times when Jack instinctively pulled back, wrestling with years of emotional isolation. But there were also genuine moments of connection, shared laughter, and small victories celebrated together. A significant change came when the girls started attending school. Jack had initially hired private tutors, but Dr. Martinez insisted that socialization would be important for the adoption case. On the first day of school, Jack found himself more nervous than the girls. He accompanied them to the school gate, adjusting their backpacks and repeating instructions. "Remember, if you need anything, just call. I'll come right away," he said for the third time. Emily rolled her eyes but smiled. "We know, Mr. Jack. We'll be fine." As he watched them enter the school, Jack felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. They seemed so small, so vulnerable, but also so brave. Therapy was another important adjustment. Jack initially resisted the idea, but Dr. Martinez insisted it would benefit everyone. Surprisingly, it was Emily who convinced him. "If you go too, Mr. Jack, then we can go," she said with wisdom beyond her years. Thus, Jack found himself sitting in a cozy office, talking about his feelings with a gentle but sharp-eyed therapist. It was uncomfortable at first, but gradually he began to see the value in those sessions. Evenings at the Steele mansion took on a new routine. After dinner, Jack would sit with the girls to help with homework. He discovered, to his surprise, that there was a lot he didn't remember from elementary school. "What do you mean you don't know how to do long division, Mr. Jack?" Olivia asked one night, genuinely perplexed. "Aren't you like super smart?" Jack laughed, feeling oddly liberated by admitting his ignorance. "Being smart doesn't mean knowing everything, Olivia. Sometimes it means knowing when to ask for help." Together, they learned and relearned, Jack often studying late into the night so he could better help the next day. Over time, Emily began to lower her guard. The girl, who had always been protective and a bit distrustful, started showing a softer, more vulnerable side. One night, after a particularly frightening nightmare, it was Jack she sought out for comfort. He found her standing at his bedroom door, her eyes full of unshed tears. Can I stay here for a while?" she asked hesitantly. Jack felt his heart expand. "Of course, Emily, always." As the girl curled up next to him, Jack realized how much he had changed. The old Jack Steele would have felt uncomfortable, maybe even irritated by the intrusion. Now, he felt whole. Changes also began manifesting at Steele Tech. Jack initiated a complete overhaul of the company's policies, focusing on social responsibility and sustainability. "But Mr. Steele," one of the directors protested at a meeting, "these changes will significantly impact our profits." Jack looked out the conference room window, thinking of the girls who awaited him at home. "Maybe it's time we redefine what we consider success," he replied calmly. There was still plenty of uncertainty, many doubts. Jack often wondered if he was making the right decisions, both personally and professionally. But when he saw Olivia's smile after she mastered a new skill, or the pride in Emily's eyes when he praised her schoolwork, he knew he was on the right path. One evening, months after the girls had arrived, Jack was in his office reviewing documents when he heard commotion in the hallway. Curious, he opened the door. Emily and Olivia were there, holding a large, colorful poster. "Surprise!" they shouted in unison. Jack stared at the poster, stunned. In big, crooked letters, it read, "Best Mr. Jack in the world. We wanted to thank you," Emily explained, looking almost shy, "for everything." Olivia nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, you're the best, Mr. Jack." Jack felt his throat tighten with emotion. Speechless, he knelt down and opened his arms. The girls didn't hesitate, throwing themselves into his embrace. In that moment, with Emily and Olivia in his arms, Jack Steele knew that no matter what challenges the future held, he would face them. Because now he had something to fight for, something more precious than any fortune or corporate empire. He had a family. The days that followed brought new challenges and adjustments. Jack discovered that raising two girls required far more than simply providing a roof and food. It was a constant commitment, a delicate dance between setting boundaries and offering freedom, protecting them and letting them grow. At Steele Tech, the changes Jack proposed began making waves. Some executives embraced the new direction, seeing the potential for innovation and sustainable growth. Others resisted, fearing that a focus on social responsibility would harm profits. Jack found himself navigating uncharted waters, both at home and at work. There were nights he stayed up late, pondering corporate decisions and parental worries with equal intensity. One day, during an important shareholders' meeting, Jack received a call from the school. Olivia had fallen during recess and hurt her arm. Without hesitation, he excused himself from the meeting and rushed to the hospital. Hours later, with Olivia safely at home, her arm bandaged and sporting a brave smile, Jack received an angry call from one of his major shareholders. "Steele, have you lost your mind?" the man shouted on the phone. "Walking out of a meeting like that over a kid's scrape?" Jack felt a surge of anger rise in his chest, but kept it in check. "It wasn't just a scrape, Mr. Thompson, and yes, I'd do it again without hesitation. My family comes first now." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. "Family?" Thompson finally said, incredulous. "Since when do you have a family, Steele?" The question hit Jack like a punch to the gut. He glanced toward the living room, where Emily was reading to Olivia, trying to distract her from the pain. "Since I realized what really matters in life," Jack answered quietly, before hanging up the phone. As the weeks turned into months, life at the Steele mansion found a new rhythm. Mornings were a flurry of getting ready for school, with Jack often burning toast and spilling juice in his attempts to make the perfect breakfast. "Mr. Jack," Emily said one day, laughing as he struggled with the waffle maker, "maybe we should teach you how to cook." Jack feigned offense. "I'm perfectly capable of cooking, thank you very much," he said, just as the waffle maker emitted a plume of smoke. Evenings were filled with study sessions, board games, and conversations that often stretched past bedtime. Jack discovered he cherished these quiet moments when the girls shared their thoughts and dreams with him. Not everything was smooth, of course. There were arguments about rules and bedtimes, moments of frustration on both sides. Jack had to learn to be firm without being authoritarian, to listen and understand without losing control. One night, after a particularly heated argument over bedtime, Jack retreated to his office, feeling drained and inadequate. He wondered, not for the first time, if he was truly doing the right thing by trying to raise these girls. That was when he heard a soft knock on the door. Emily walked in, her face a mix of remorse and determination. "Mr. Jack," she began, "I know we can be difficult sometimes, but thank you for not giving up on us." Jack felt a knot in his throat. "I would never give up on you, Emily," he replied softly. Emily nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "We won't give up on you either," she said, before turning to leave the office. In that moment, Jack realized that despite all the challenges and doubts, he was exactly where he needed to be. The legal hurdles, the corporate complications, the daily struggles of raising two kids, all seemed small compared to the deep satisfaction he felt watching Emily and Olivia grow and flourish under his care. As he prepared for another day of balancing board meetings and homework assignments, Jack Steele knew the path ahead would still be fraught with challenges. But for the first time in his life, he looked forward to facing them. Because now he had a greater purpose than simply accumulating wealth and power. He had a family to protect, nurture, and love. And that, Jack realized, was the greatest success he had ever achieved. Jack Steele sat in his office, eyes fixed on the folder on his desk. His heart pounded with a mix of anxiety and guilt. After weeks of hesitating, he had finally given in to the urge to investigate Emily and Olivia's past. "It's for their own good," he muttered to himself, trying to justify his decision. "I need to know where they came from so I can help them better." But a voice in his head accused him of invading their privacy, of betraying the trust the girls had placed in him. Jack ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of his choice. With trembling hands, Jack opened the folder. The face of a middle-aged man stared back at him from the first page. Thomas Walker, 42, a former Steel Tech employee. Jack frowned, a faint memory stirring. Before he could read more, a commotion in the hallway caught his attention. Quickly, he shut the folder and hid it in a drawer. Seconds later, Emily and Olivia burst into the office, their faces lit with smiles. "Mr. Jack," Olivia exclaimed. "Look what we did at school today." They approached, proudly displaying their drawings. Jack forced a smile, trying to push aside his guilt. "Wow, they're beautiful," he praised, examining the colorful scribbles. "What did you draw, Emily?" The older girl hesitated. "It's our family," she said softly. "Me, Olivia, you, and our parents in heaven." Jack felt his heart clench. In the drawing, besides the figures representing him and the twins, there were two ethereal forms floating above, surrounded by clouds. "They'd be proud of you," Jack said gently, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. Olivia nodded solemnly. "Mummy always said we'd do great things one day." Jack swallowed hard, suddenly feeling out of place. Who was he to try replacing these girls' parents? That night, after putting the twins to bed, Jack returned to his office. He retrieved the folder from the drawer, determined to learn the truth no matter how painful. As he read the investigator's report, Jack felt his world crumble. Thomas and Sarah Walker, Emily and Olivia's parents, had both been employees at Steel Tech for nearly a decade. Thomas was a talented engineer, Sarah a promising data analyst. 3 years ago, during a massive company restructuring, both were laid off. Jack vaguely remembered that period. He had delegated the layoffs to HR, focused only on the numbers and efficiency. The report detailed the hardships the family faced after losing their jobs, losing their home, financial problems, depression. Sarah had died of pneumonia 2 years ago, unable to afford proper treatment. Thomas, devastated by her loss and struggling to care for the girls, died in a car accident 6 months later. Jack felt sick. His decisions, his relentless pursuit of profit and efficiency, had destroyed this family. And now, by some cruel twist of fate, the orphans he was trying to protect were the same children he had indirectly left destitute. In the days that followed, Jack struggled to maintain composure. Every smile from Emily, every hug from Olivia, felt like a knife in his heart. How could he ever tell them the truth? How could he hope for their forgiveness? Meanwhile, his professional life gave him no respite. Jack found himself juggling board meetings with bedtime stories, contract negotiations with homework help. One afternoon, in the middle of a crucial video conference, Jack was interrupted by screaming upstairs. "Excuse me," he muttered to the executives on screen. "I need to check on something. I'll be right back." Racing up the stairs, he found Emily and Olivia in the midst of a heated argument over who had taken the other's teddy bear. "Girls," Jack said, trying to keep calm, "please, I need you to settle down. I'm in the middle of an important meeting." Emily crossed her arms, looking hurt. "Is your meeting more important than us?" The question hit Jack like a punch to the gut. "No, of course not," he answered quickly. "You're always my priority." But as he mediated the argument and returned to his meeting, Jack wondered if he was really being truthful. Was he truly putting the girls first, or was he repeating the same mistakes of the past, prioritizing business over people? It was in this atmosphere of guilt and internal conflict that the investigator scheduled a final meeting with Jack. "Mr. Steele," the man said, his face solemn, "there's one more thing you need to know about the Walkers." Jack felt his heart speed up. "What is it?" "Before he died, Thomas Walker was working on a project, something he believed would revolutionize the tech industry, but he never had the chance to present it to Steel Tech. Jack frowned. What kind of project? The investigator handed Jack a USB drive. All the details are here, but I must warn you, Mr. Steele. If it's really what Walker believed it to be, it could change everything for Steel Tech. Jack stared at the tiny device in his hand, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. Not only had he inadvertently caused the Walkers' downfall, he might have also deprived the world of a groundbreaking innovation. That night, after hours poring over Thomas Walker's files, Jack made a decision. He needed to tell the girls the truth. They deserved to know where they came from, who their parents were. With a heavy heart, he called Emily and Olivia into his office. They entered, looking curious and slightly nervous. "What's wrong, Mr. Jack?" Emily asked. "Always the most perceptive." Jack took a deep breath. "Girls, there's something very important I need to tell you. It's about your parents." The twins' eyes widened. Olivia clutched Emily's hand, while Emily stared at Jack with a mix of fear and hope. "You remember I said I was the owner of a big company?" Jack began, his voice trembling slightly. "Well, it turns out your parents worked for me. They were very talented employees at Steel Tech." Emily frowned. "But why didn't we ever know that?" Jack felt tears prick his eyes. "Because I made a terrible mistake. A few years ago, I laid off a lot of people. Your parents were among them." The silence that followed was deafening. Jack could almost see the gears turning in Emily's mind, connecting the dots. She began, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're the reason we lost our home. The reason Mommy got sick." Jack felt his heart shatter. I didn't know. I had no idea what the consequences would be. But yes, my actions played a part in all of this. And I'm so sorry, more than I can ever say." Olivia, who had stayed silent until now, suddenly burst into tears. "I want my mommy," she sobbed. "I want my daddy." Emily held her sister, shooting Jack a look that was equal parts anger and confusion. "Why are you telling us this now?" Jack knelt, tears running freely down his face. "Because you deserve the truth. Because I want to fix things if I can. And because I care about you, and I don't want there to be secrets between us." The hours that followed were an emotional roller coaster. There was yelling, crying, and long, heavy silences. Jack answered every question as best he could, exposing his soul in a way he never had before. He told them about their father's project, about how he planned to implement it, and give full credit to Thomas Walker. He explained the changes he was making at the company, changes inspired by them. "I know none of this can bring your parents back," Jack said gently, "but I want you to know they were incredible people. And that, thanks to you, I'm trying to be a better person every day." Emily, who had stayed strong for her sister throughout the conversation, finally allowed her own tears to fall. "I don't know what to feel," she admitted. "I'm mad, but I also don't want to lose you, Mr. Jack." Jack felt a surge of relief and affection so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. "You'll never lose me," he promised. "No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you if you'll have me." Olivia, her eyes red from crying, looked at Jack. "You're not going to leave us like Mommy and Daddy did?" "Never," Jack answered firmly. "I'm here to stay, sweetheart. I promise." In the days that followed, the Steele mansion was a place of many difficult conversations, many tears, and, surprisingly, many moments of deep connection. Jack shared the stories and photos he had discovered of Thomas and Sarah Walker, helping the girls reconnect with their roots. Emily and Olivia processed the revelation in different ways. Emily, always the more mature, alternated between moments of anger and periods of intense questioning. She wanted to know everything about the company, about the decisions that had led to her parents' layoff. Olivia, on the other hand, seemed more interested in hearing stories about her parents. She asked Jack to describe what they were like, what they enjoyed doing, what their laughter sounded like. Meanwhile, Jack delved into a deep reflection on corporate responsibility and the impact of his past actions. He spent sleepless nights reviewing old company policies, questioning every decision made purely for numbers. At Steel Tech, changes started happening at an accelerated pace. Jack convened an emergency meeting of the board of directors. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice filled with resolve. "We're about to enter a new era for steel tech, an era of responsibility, ethical innovation, and caring for our employees and our community." The reaction was mixed. Some directors applauded the new direction. Others expressed concerns about profit margins. "The profits will come," Jack assured them, "but not at the expense of human lives, not at the cost of destroying families." He laid out a series of new initiatives, a support fund for employees in hardship, massive investments in ethical research and development, rehiring programs for former employees. "And finally," Jack said, "I'd like to announce the Walker Project. Based on the brilliant ideas of a former employee, I believe it will not only revolutionize our company, but the entire industry." Resistance was fierce. There were threats of resignation, accusations that Jack had lost his way. But he stood firm. "If anyone here can't align with this new vision," he said calmly, "then perhaps it's time to reconsider your role at Steel Tech." While Jack fought his corporate battles, he found renewed strength and purpose at home with the girls. One night, after a particularly grueling day of negotiations, Jack arrived home exhausted. He found Emily and Olivia waiting in the living room, holding a large poster. "What's this?" he asked, intrigued. The girls smiled, revealing the poster. It read, "Best Mr. Jack in the world, even when he makes mistakes." Jack felt tears welling in his eyes. You made this for me." Emily nodded. "We know you're trying to fix things. And we want to help." "Yeah," Olivia added. "Mommy always said forgiveness is important." Jack knelt down, opening his arms. The girls didn't hesitate, rushing into his hug. "You two are amazing," he whispered, holding them tight. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." "You're trying," Emily replied simply. "That's what matters." In the days that followed, Jack devoted himself even more to balancing his new family life with his corporate responsibilities. It wasn't easy. There were times he messed up, forgetting important school events or arriving late for dinner because a meeting ran long. But with every mistake, Jack learned. He began blocking off time on his schedule specifically for the girls, refusing to book any appointments that might interfere with important family moments. At Steel Tech, the changes Jack had implemented started to show results. The Walker Project, in particular, generated excitement in the scientific community. Investors who had initially been skeptical began showing renewed interest in the company. One day, during a presentation for potential partners, Jack surprised everyone by bringing Emily and Olivia on stage. "These girls," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "are the reason we're making all these changes. They taught me that real success isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the positive impact we can have on people's lives." The audience fell silent, many visibly moved. Emily and Olivia, though nervous, stood proudly by Jack's side. In the months that followed, Steel Tech underwent a remarkable transformation. The Walker Project launched with great success, revolutionizing the industry just as Thomas had envisioned. Jack made sure Thomas Walker's name was prominently associated with the project, honoring his legacy. At home, Jack's relationship with the girls continued to deepen. There were difficult moments, of course, days when the loss of their parents weighed heavily, when anger at the unfairness of the past resurfaced. But there were also moments of pure joy, of genuine connection, of a family healing and growing together. One night, while helping Emily with her homework, she looked at Jack with a serious expression. "Mr. Jack," as she said, "I think Dad would be proud of you, of what you're doing with his company." Jack felt a lump in his throat. "You think so?" Emily nodded. "He always said he wanted to make a difference in the world, and now, through you, he is." In that moment, Jack realized how far they had come. From a lonely, cynical CEO to a man not only caring for 2 children, but also transforming his company and potentially the world. He knew the road ahead would still be full of challenges, more obstacles, more moments of doubt. But looking at Emily and Olivia, seeing love and trust in their eyes, he knew he would face anything for them. Jack Steele, the man who once believed success was measured only in numbers, now understood that his greatest achievement was the family he'd formed and the legacy of positive change he was creating. And so, with his heart filled with hope and determination, Jack held his daughters close, ready to face whatever the future might bring. Together, as a family. Jack Steele straightened his tie, feeling a mix of nerves and resolve as he entered attorney Dr. Martinez's office. It was the official start of the process to adopt Emily and Olivia, a step that, only a few months ago, would have seemed unthinkable for the once lonely CEO. "Mr. Steele," Dr. Martinez greeted him with a warm smile, "I'm impressed by your decision. It's not common to see someone in your position willing to take on such a responsibility." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "They've changed my life, Dr. Martinez. I can't imagine a future without them." The attorney then began outlining the adoption process, and Jack felt his stomach sink. Background checks, home visits, psychological evaluations. Each step seemed designed to expose his shortcomings as a potential father. "And I should warn you, Mr. Steele," Dr. Martinez added, "given your public profile, there will be extra scrutiny. The press will certainly take an interest in this case." Jack felt a wave of fear. He had always fiercely guarded his privacy. The idea of exposing not just himself but also Emily and Olivia to public scrutiny terrified him. But then he remembered Olivia's smile when he helped her with her homework, the trust in Emily's eyes when she shared a secret with him, and he knew he would face anything for them. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said firmly. In the weeks that followed, Jack found himself caught in a whirlwind of paperwork, interviews, and preparations. Every aspect of his life was scrutinized. His past as a ruthless CEO was questioned, and his motives for adopting were probed. There were moments when Jack almost cracked. One particularly difficult night, after a grueling session with an adoption psychologist, he locked himself in his office, wondering if he really had what it took to be a father. That was when he heard a gentle knock on the door. "Mr. Jack," Emily's voice came from outside. "Are you okay?" Jack took a deep breath, composing himself before opening the door. Emily and Olivia stood there, their faces filled with concern. "It's okay, girls," he tried to smile, but knew he wasn't convincing. Emily frowned. "Is it because of the adoption? Are you changing your mind?" The vulnerability in her voice made Jack's heart ache. He knelt to meet their eyes. "Never," he said firmly. "I'd never change my mind about you. It's just, sometimes I wonder if I'm good enough to be the father you deserve." To his surprise, it was Olivia who answered. "But you already are, Mr. Jack," she said softly. "You take care of us, make us laugh, help us with homework. That's what dads do, right?" Jack felt tears form in his eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. That's exactly what dads do." In that moment, Jack felt his resolve renew. He would face every obstacle, overcome every challenge, to make official what his heart already knew. These girls were his daughters. As Dr. Martinez predicted, public scrutiny was intense. The news that the notorious Wall Street shark Jack Steele was adopting 2 homeless girls spread through the media like wildfire. Reporters camped outside the Steele mansion, and speculation ran rampant on social media. Some questioned Jack's motives, calling it a PR stunt. Others applauded his apparent change of heart. Jack, who once would have hidden behind a wall of PR agents, decided to face the situation head-on. He gave an exclusive interview with Emily and Olivia by his side. "These girls," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "have taught me more about love, compassion, and what truly matters in life than all my years in the corporate world. They're not a publicity stunt or a strategic move. They're my family." The sincerity in his words touched many hearts. Public opinion began to turn in his favor. At Steele Tech, Jack implemented a series of family-friendly policies inspired by his own experience. Extended parental leave, on-site daycare, flexible schedules for parents. Each initiative was designed to foster a more compassionate and family-centered work environment. "Our employees aren't just resources," he declared at a shareholders' meeting. "They're people with lives, families, and responsibilities beyond these walls, and it's our responsibility to support them." As he navigated the challenges of the adoption process and the changes at his company, Jack found a new balance in his personal life. He learned to prioritize time with the girls, even on his busiest days. One evening, while helping Olivia with a science project, she looked at him seriously. "Mr. Jack," she said hesitantly, "do you think we can call you Dad someday?" Jack felt his heart stop for a moment. He glanced at Emily, who watched quietly, her expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. "I would be honored," he answered gently, his voice choked with emotion. "But only if and when you're ready." "There's no rush." Emily stepped closer, her eyes shining with tears she refused to shed. "We already see you as our dad, you know? We just didn't know if you wanted that." Jack pulled them into a tight hug, feeling his heart overflow with affection. "I do," he whispered, "more than anything in the world." The months passed, each day bringing new challenges and small joys. Jack learned how to braid Olivia's hair for school, how to comfort Emily after a fight with a friend, how to juggle board meetings with family game nights. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of waiting, the day of the final adoption hearing arrived. Jack, Dawn, Emily, and Olivia entered the courthouse, a palpable mix of nerves and excitement buzzing among them. When the judge uttered the words, "The adoption is finalized," the courtroom erupted in applause. Jack hugged his daughters, now officially his daughters, tears of joy streaming down his face. "We did it, Dad," Emily whispered, using the title for the first time. Jack felt his heart swell in a way he never thought possible. "Yes, my dear," he replied. "We did." The celebration at the Steele mansion afterward was a burst of happiness. Friends, colleagues, and even a few reporters who had followed Jack's journey gathered to celebrate the new family. In a quiet moment during the party, Jack found himself alone on the balcony, watching the sunset. He reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him here. From a solitary CEO to a loving father and compassionate leader. "A penny for your thoughts," Dr. Martinez's voice surprised him. Jack smiled. "Just thinking about how life can change in an instant. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined any of this." The attorney nodded. "You've undergone a remarkable transformation, Mr. Steele. Not just in your personal life, but in the impact you're making on the business community." It was true. Jack's initiatives at Steele Tech had inspired other companies to follow suit. Corporate culture was slowly shifting, with more emphasis on employee well-being and social responsibility. All thanks to two little girls who were brave enough to offer a piece of chocolate to a stranger, Jack said, his voice filled with admiration. Later that night, after the guests had left and the house was quiet, Jack found Emily and Olivia in their room, waiting for their bedtime story. "What story do you want to hear tonight?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Tell us our story, Dad," Olivia requested, snuggling against him. Jack smiled, pulling them close. "Once upon a time," he began, "there was a man who thought he had everything, but in reality, he had nothing." As he recounted the tale of how they met and how the girls had changed his life, Jack marveled at the journey they'd taken. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, every tear shed, it had all been worth it to reach this point. By the time he finished, Emily and Olivia were already asleep, peaceful and content. Jack watched them for a moment, a flood of affection and gratitude washing over him. Quietly, he stood and walked to the window. The city lights sparkled below, a sea of illumination against the night sky. Jack thought of all the families out there, all the parents and children, and felt a connection he'd never known before. He thought of the employees at Steele Tech, who could now spend more time with their own families thanks to the new policies. He thought of other companies following his lead, creating a ripple effect of positive change. And he thought of Thomas and Sarah Walker, Emily and Olivia's biological parents. "Thank you," he whispered to the starry sky. "Thank you for trusting your daughters to me. I promise I'll take care of them and honor your memory every day." Returning to the bed, Jack kissed each of his daughters softly on the forehead. "Good night, my little ones," he murmured. "Daddy's here for you." With that, Jack Steele, CEO, philanthropist, and above all, father, closed the door gently, his heart filled with a peace and joy he never knew was possible. Final reflection. Jack sat in his office, gazing at a framed photo of Emily and Olivia on his desk. He reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him to this point. Once a man focused only on profits and power, he had transformed into someone who valued human connection above all. The girls had not only filled a void in his life, but also inspired him to become a better version of himself. Through them, he had rediscovered his humanity and his purpose. Jack realized that true success wasn't measured in dollars or titles, but in the positive impact we have on the lives of others. His personal transformation had triggered a wave of change at Steel Tech and beyond, proving that business and compassion were not mutually exclusive. As he looked out the window at the city he once viewed only as a battleground for corporate conquests, Jack now saw a place brimming with potential to make a difference. He understood that his journey was far from over. There was still much to learn, much room to grow. But with Emily and Olivia by his side, he felt ready to face any challenge. The future, once so lonely and cold, now glowed with the promise of shared love, growth, and purpose. Jack Steele, the man who once believed success was a solitary island, now knew that true wealth lay in the connections we build and the lives we touch. And thanks to two brave little girls, he had a lifetime of riches to explore.